I mentioned this quest is a YouTube road trip. Well, it's a series of real road trips too. Today I'm getting out of rainy Seattle and heading for Park City, Utah. From our sales stats, we know Park City is a hotbed of ski stance alignment. There are lots of great boot fitters here, and I'm going to talk to some of the best. That's more like it. Glad that drive is behind me. And here I am at my first stop, Park City Ski Boot. Closed. We'll have to see about that. Brent Amsbury, Park City Ski Boot. Thanks for spending the time with me today.
No problem.
I've really been looking forward to this, and we've dealt together over the phone a little bit over the last 10 years, and here we are sitting face to face. Can you kind of encapsulate your background just for a couple minutes? I know you're a CPED.
So,
kind of go from there.
well, I got started ski racing in 1979 as just a junior racer out at Stevens Pass.
Oh, wow,
and,
one of my aunts. Yes.
And I was an equipment junkie, equipment guru, and I was totally into gear. And right from the get-go, I ran into all sorts of boot fitting issues and even alignment issues at the time. I didn't know they were alignment issues. I just knew that I could always turn left, but I couldn't turn right. And got into working into shops to figure out my own issues, to be able to sponsor my own desire for ski racing. And the more I got into it, the more I learned about boot fitting, and then all of a sudden this term of canting came up, right? And canting was kind of like this voodoo, something that racers did and didn't know how to do it, right? So when I started up my shop back in Bellevue, Washington, and offered boot fitting, I started researching more about canting and found out, well, you needed a planer and you needed to cut the sole, and you can only do it on solid sole boots. And so it became this sort of engineering or mechanical nightmare to do the canting process. But the epiphany moment with canting for myself in terms of my history as a boot fitter was when I was able to cant myself once. I finally played with some shims, and it revolutionized my skiing. And so I carried on continuing with boot fitting. It really enhanced my boot fitting to offer canting, and went back in 2004, got my CPED certified Pedorthist certification, and have been offering a more medically based orthopedic, let's call it orthopedic based approach ever since. So that's kind of my history in a nutshell. But this is my second shop now. This is I had a shop called World Cup Skier Service, and then I moved to Utah and started up Park City Ski Boot about 15, 16 years ago.
So the premise for this whole series is that we don't really, or it's not really common knowledge amongst the public what the value is there and where we should be going with it. So, what do you view as the ideal skier stance? Is the ideal flat? Is the ideal, is it slightly inside? Is it slightly outside? And does it vary by the skier and their expertise? How do you see the ideal for the outcome of the process?
There is an ideal, but there's no perfect ideal.
Okay.
All right. And to do this properly, you have to take into multiple variables. That is, the ability level of the skier. What's the skier's commitment level? What is the skier's interest in the different types of terrain? For instance, if you had a expert powder guide, helicopter guide, they're not going to want to be set up like a FIS racer.
Right.
Right.
But how do they want to be set up, and how does the FIS racer want to be set up?
Well, the FIS racer is going to want maximum edge. So you'll probably cant them. You'll bring their alignment closer to the center, right? Which would be almost what we would call slightly over-canted position, maybe by ½ degree. Where for slalom or for certain events, they would want to have the edges right away. Not every racer would want that, but some racers prefer right down the middle of the boot so that it lights up the ski right away.
So in terms of balance, when you say right down the middle of the boot, is I view flat as neutral, and so if you're talking about going beyond neutral to the inside, it's coming from that 0 point, which is the weight's balanced evenly across the feet.
They would still be flat,
Okay.
but their knee tracking would be
Okay.
closer to the center line or that molding line that you see on the boot.
Okay.
Where when you're saying inside, you're talking about lining up with the second toe.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be approximately 1 degree inside of that center line of the boot, okay, or about a 1 centimeter, and that would be inside. Where maybe a powder skier would want to be almost closer to their big toe, which we would call slightly under-edged.
Okay.
Because that would help it feel more shmeary, where the ski would slide a little bit more before it enters the turn. But there's definitely a range, from around where the big toe is to the second toe. That's where we're looking for while maintaining flat. All right. If we lose flatness, then we lose some of the ability of the canting. If we have a person who's tracking right over the second toe, but they're riding on their outside edges, the effect of canting is diminished. So we really want to first achieve a level of flatness and then guide the canting to the best trade-off of flatness to being slightly inside the center.
I see anything off of flat being neutral, any canting to the inside is being kind of stealing from the outside edges to give to the inside edges. It's a zero-sum game. There's a fulcrum there on the long axis of the ski. If you cant to the inside, you are by definition making the guy work harder to get to the other edge in a turn. Do you have what do you recognize that that trade-off, you're deliberately weighting it towards a particular edge?
We try to get flat. Okay, we try to achieve flat. Good racers, like really good strong skiers, have the ability to change their stance width on demand. That will change the flatness, right?
And get some both ends of that. Right.
So if you're a really accomplished skier, you know how to change. You can change your stance.
Yeah.
You can go to a wide stance. You can go to a narrow stance, and you can feel the difference in the flatness in doing so. A less accomplished skier won't be able to do that. They don't have the intrinsic muscle capacity to do that. They're a little fearful maybe, or they're just, this is the only width of stance that works for me. So with skiers that we know that clearly show that they don't have as much accomplishment in their skiing, we really try to, we do whatever it takes to get to flat.
How do you account for when you're talking about knee position moving around and you're judging it, say on a hard surface here, the fact that snow deforms, there's a fulcrum down the longitudinal axis of the base of the ski, and it tips. If the snow deforms at all, isn't that messing up where you think you've put the center of their knee?
It can.
Okay.
Yeah. So we use multiple systems. We use a hard race, like we'll call race level, which is a hard surface. And then we also use a Cantco system, which is a set of wands with a rounded bottom. And then we also have the atomic system, which are flat platens, but with foam on the bottom it accounts for some of the deform. Correct.
Okay. So those are your, the way that you evaluate somebody is those various methods. Have you tried out, there's a lot of people out there using plumb bobs and T-squares, and there's electronic devices, and how did you arrive at the ones that you use?
Well, we want to take basically two sample sets. One is the race with the plumb bob, finding the center of the knee mass, and then dropping a plumb bob lying down. You could use a T-square as well, but we just like using the plumb bob because it's fairly quick and simple. So that's our little bit more of our hard surface, and then we use the Cantco or the atomic as the more soft version, and then we start averaging between the two. We want to see if both results match. If you have a completely different result off a hard surface versus a softer, more deformation or rocker ability surface, then you need to go back and look and see what's going on in the fit of the boot and what's your foot support level, and you need to go back kind of from the beginning and go back through the circle, and did you align the cuffs properly, right? So if both results are very close to each other off a more firm surface versus a more rockered surface, then you know you're on the right path because you're getting very similar results. They might be within a half degree of each other, but the direction of canting, the amount of canting should be fairly close.
How, of the people that walk in the door for boot work, just walk in your door, what percentage of them are good to go as is, and what percentage of them need some sort of correction?
That varies over time. It varies on your demographic. From season to season, though, I think it averages out that maybe 35% of the boots that we sell will have some type of canting addressed. Cuff alignment, sole canting, something going on. I would say 60% are within the range. Yeah.
Meaning less than half a degree.
Yeah, they're within the range. And the other thing is we take in consideration is that we don't want to overcant. That is, we don't want to promote something that they're not going to use. If the skier says, hey, I ski 5 days a year, I'm just out here having fun, and they're within a half degree, we're good to go. If they're saying I'm working with an instructor and I'm committed to the sport and I do over 15, 20, 30, 40 days a season and I've got a pair of carving skis, they really show they're committed to the sport, we are going to really hone in on the canting, all right, a lot more. So that's the variability, okay? If you have somebody who's been skiing for 40 years or 50 years and they've never had canting done, and maybe they got a little arthritis in their knees and they don't have the joint space available, we have to back off of our insistence that this is the most ideal position. We have to have that relationship with them and say, okay, you're happy with where you're at. Good, we'll stay there. If people are not happy where they're at and they go, what's going to be the game improvement plan for my skiing? Canting. Wow, we're there for them, all right?
So you've got the luxury of being just down the street from the lifts here at Park City. Obviously, canting requires that the toes and the heels be routed back to DIN standard heights. Do you send them up on the hill without that? Do you massage them into, if say it looks like they need 2, but you route it to 1.5 and send them up there to see how it is, and if they need that much, in fact, or do you commit the boot, the routing from the get-go? What's the back and forth between skiing up on the hill and evaluating their stance?
We feel confident enough that our evaluation system and the way we evaluate and the question and answer with our customer allows us to move right into the amount of canting they need and to go ahead and route the boot and get it DIN prepared. We do feel safety is really important. To send a customer out on a boot that wasn't routed just for testing purposes opens up a certain window.
I get a little scared because obviously the legend of the pro circuits is people using hotel keys under their boots and jacking things around, and these are skiers with an awful lot to lose in their career if they screw it up. So I'm a little wary of people going without routing anything.
Yeah, we want to make sure it meets the DIN spec. If we got it completely wrong and we've milled the boot to where it's not recoverable, I guess we're buying them another boot.
Now, in my view, canting is kind of the stance adjustment of last resort. Everything in the footbed, the boot board, the cuff, all the fit needs to be dialed, and then you go to this external issue of, do we need to change the sole angle? But I also understand that there's an awful lot going on in the boot. Some boots don't flex dead in line with the ski. They might, prejudice the inside or outside edge as you flex the boot. You got the ski tune might have come into play here. How do you get control of all of those variables to get the guy to where he needs to be, that ideal stance?
Well, it's a building system, right? You're building a foundation, and the first block of the foundation is the ski boot has to be the right size. Okay, we've had many customers over the years come in and say, I work with an instructor, or I have a friend or somebody who knows something about this, and they watch my skiing and says, I need canting. So they come in and we start the basis of assessment, and we look at their boot and go, whoa, the boot's one size too large. And we do a quick measuring assessment, and sure enough, they're 2 or 2.5 degrees under edge. We drop down the size, we get them in the right size of boot, we get them in the right last of boot, and just that eliminates 60-70% of it. So we go from 2.5 to maybe half or 1. So that's the first foundation, right? So we have to be in the right size of boot and in the right last of boot and hopefully the right flex of boot. Once we're there, we can start moving to a more ideal stance. Again, as you drop down in size, you also drop down in cuff height. So now their fore and aft stance is different. Fore and aft plays into how the knees track. So getting to the ideal stance starts with the right size of boot, right last. Then we can start actually getting good, accurate results. You're not going to get an accurate result from a boot that's too large. Okay, so we have to start with that first. And then canting and alt forms of alignment really pays the dividends, that you can make small adjustments and get big results. Boots that are too big, you can throw 3 degrees at a boot, you could throw in all sorts of heel lifts and ramp angles, and you get very little result out of it.
Now, when somebody walks in the door, do you, with no clue about their stance being screwed up, do you recognize that and take them there? Do they have to ask for it, or is it a package of services that's kind of a holistic? You're gonna come in the door, we're gonna fit your boot, and it's gonna include all of this analysis, and you're gonna walk out with the result of that? Or how does that play out, just kind of logistically in a boot fitting, appointment that somebody might?
Well, we want to include alignment assessment in every boot we sell. And we start with the initial assessment, which is when we have them standing in front of us looking at pronation and supination, and we also look at knee tracking. We're going to look at tibial varum and tibial valgum. We're going to look at if their iliac crest, if their hip joint lines up through their knees and through their ankle joint. We're going to look at them from a physical standpoint before they even get into the boot. What is it about their anatomy? Do they have a leg length discrepancy? We're going to go through all those questions, and we're going to look at them and say, hey, okay, you look like you kind of line up pretty good, or whoa, look at that bow-leggedness. That leads to another conversation. Do you have problems edging? Yeah, I chatter. Okay, guess what? Today, not only we're going to fit you a new boot, but we're going to take a good, strong look at that issue, and we're going to maybe pick boots that lend themselves better to your bow-leggedness or knock-kneedness, because we have cuff alignment tools with the manufacturers that allow us to make a greater range of adjustments. So we have to start off there. Once we see their anatomy and say, okay, you're a green light, you look pretty straight, we can use the wide range of boot selection, or no, we've got kind of a red light that says you're deviated from an optimal position. Now we have to narrow down our boot selection to the ones we know are going to accept a cantology system and have cuff alignment tools that are easy to use and easy to get full range of cuff alignment out.
What do you think about the concept of stance evolving as ski technique and skis have evolved? I say that because I'm much older than you. I remember when the skis were way narrow and 215s were pretty normal for a guy my size. And I'd rip around canted slightly to the inside. And now today, everything's really wide, and I'm trying to use my little toe edges more and get, more out of both skis. And with my body weight, obviously I need all the edges I can get in the snow to try and scrub speed and carve my turns in a much more modern way. And therefore, I'm starting to dial my canting back out so as to get myself a little bit more to the outside edge of the inside ski. So do you see any of that stuff? Do you, people talk about that at all?
See some of that, okay. Right? We do see some of that, but we do talk about or ask questions. What do you feel is your comfortable ski width stance? Some people will stand, and I like to ski more glue booted together. Some people like a much wider. We notice racers definitely say, hey, what's your starting stance? And boom, the boots are much wider apart. We do see skiers have sort of a range. If you're more recreational skier, your tendency to try to be a little more stylistic. You bring your feet a little closer together. Of course, bump skiers, they're even a little closer together. So we have to take that into account. If you're a freestyle skier, your stance is much closer together. So your alignment has to be based on that. So there is a range, and we bring that into that assessment process. Generally speaking, though, people have adopted a wider stance, especially younger people who are on wider skis are adopting a more standard hip width stance. And racers, of course, have learned to ski in these wider stances, and of course, we see them want to be aligned in a stance that's most familiar to them.
So, want to kind of end this part with are there any things that we haven't talked about that you think the public needs to know about this whole thing, that are the message out there to skiers about boot fit in general? Obviously the lateral stuff that I'm most interested in.
I think the public needs to ask good questions of the boots and the brands themselves, and say, not just, what do you think of this boot? Is the boot cantable? What is the range of cuff alignment? Ask a little bit more technical questions. Put the pressure on us, the boot fitters, and the retailers to demand boots that have more alignment control. We have seen over the years that manufacturers have diminished some of their alignment tooling on their boots, of course, to save costs. And that's because they're not getting feedback from the public as saying, this is really a requirement. I remember when I was selling boots way back in the 80s, some of the boots had huge cuff alignment. Some of the Austrian boots had 7 degrees in one direction and 3 degrees.
All called canted.
But those mechanics were really a unique tool for us. San Marco had a worm gear-driven system. I mean, there was some really cool stuff out there. I think manufacturers should be hearing from their public and saying, hey, we want boots with really good cantable capacity, like what Cantology offers, and we want good cuff alignment tooling on our boots, even down to lower price ranges where they tend to be less available.
I enjoyed watching your interview with Tom Gelly, where you really talked about the participation that the skier can have in the boot fitting process, and how much and homework that they can do, and kind of a collaborative effort. And I'll put a link to Tom's channel up here for people that want to get a little bit bigger dose of Brent Amsbury. I'd like to talk about how much canting you think can be accomplished within the boot. There's people talking about doing a lot of canting within the boot, and I worry about that ankle stack getting out of whack, and how things are impinged when you press into the front of the boot. You may think you're getting there when you're not really out on the hill, but
I don't ever cant off the boot board. We always try to start off with a neutral, flat boot board. If the boot board has been variced, we go ahead and take that out, because we're going to build a custom orthotic. The only time I've ever put some type of cant on a boot board was to offload a knee, where we had a knee joint osteoarthritic process that was deteriorating the knee, and the client had a prescription for a wedge. And so we integrated the wedge into the boot board to help offload the knee, but we still went back and did canting off the boot sole to get the tracking of the knee better.
So in the orthotics don't impose any canting either. It puts the ankle in a neutral.
Correct. We're just trying to get to the heel, as in medical terms, is calcaneal rectus, where we're just trying to get the calcaneus as vertical as possible. We're sensitive to the subtalis, what's going to be the most comfortable subtalis position. But we're trying to really just, in a nutshell, get the foot in its most neutral position, where it's best aligned in the boot. To try to cant that person within the boot off the boot board, I don't think the success rate is particularly great. I think you end up with some results that can be quite variable. We've had clients come in where they were canted off the boot board. They were actually walked in with instructors and said, this is a disaster. We're not achieving what we need in the hill. Can you please figure out why? And so we tore the boot apart, and there was a big wedge on the boot board, supposed canting. Once we removed it and built a good orthotic and went through our process again, bringing everything to neutral and then providing the canting off the boot sole, the magic started to happen again. And so the ski instructor took that person back out and said, oh, thank you. Oh my gosh, we're now finally making progress here. So I'm just not a big fan of that. And maybe that's just my opinion, but I just try to start off with a more neutral approach and then build on that.
Educated opinion, yes, and experienced opinion. So how would you characterize your clientele here? Is it the tourists, the ski instructors, the racers, everybody? What's the sweet spot for your business? I'm just curious.
Yeah, the sweet spot would be, I mean, that just changes with the season. You have a lot of people who live here and have second homes here. And so there's a big chunk of the clientele, people who are really committed to skiing in the area, whether they reside in California or Florida in the summertime. They come back here and they make a strong 3, 4, 5 month commitment. So we have these really strong committed skiers of all different ages, then including that as the ski instructors and the racers. So that's a big chunk of our clientele. And then of course we have our tourists, right? And they come in during the Christmas holiday and last until March. But for people to journey to a destination area, they're pretty involved. They want to get better. They want the best out of their equipment, and so we do see a good percentage of those people who have troubles with edging and have historical issues with trying to improve their skiing ability, get canting and find that it really helps them.
Well, Brent, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me, and thanks for 10 years of, great doing business with you, and appreciate the growth. And Park City, in my opinion, I've got the sales figures to prove it, but is kind of the stance and alignment capital of the world. So you're right here in the heart of it. There's a lot of great boot fitters, and you're certainly one. Your reputation is right up there at the top.
Yeah, well, thank you for interviewing me, and thank you for doing what you do. Okay. Right? Cantology has made a huge difference for us as a business to offer a service that used to be met with a lot of voodoo and a lot of variability. And I think that Cantology brings a product to the dealer and to the consumer that really enhances the experience. It enhances our experience as a mechanic of the boot, but it enhances the ability of the consumer to ski better in a simple way. Right, in a way that makes it clean and easy. So I want to thank you for what you do.
Well, thanks. It's kind of surreal having this business, being a lifetime skier and stumbling into it. Once again, thanks for your time. It's been a pleasure. And have a great season here in Park City. I wish I were here instead of in the rainy Northwest. I hope you found that as much fun as I did, and there's more on the way. In the next episode of Quest for Perfect Stance, we'll hang around Brent's shop to watch him use both his hard surface and soft surface methods to evaluate skier stance.